Greetings, all you ducklings out there. I'm Duuz-Diz-Din coming at you with another episode review of DuckTales 2017. This time it's Season 2's episode 11 titled The Golden Spear. One of very many misleading titles in terms of DuckTales in certain cases. Because I always feel like the title means one thing and then it just completely subverts my expectations. Which is me just realizing that a lot of series do that in general. Getting back more on topic, we see Della is scrounging around for things to get her her ship, the Spear of Selene, back in working order, namely the primary fuel source. Meanwhile, we see that Penumbra is still observing Della, not completely trusting her. And by completely, I mean not at all. She does not trust Della in the slightest. And as she observes Della using the gold that, as we came to know the last time we saw an episode with Della in it, the moon people just kind of just throw away all their extra gold in their golden trash cans. It's just kind of lying all over the place. And we see that Penumbra is just spying on Della as she tries her best in order to get the Spear of Selene back in working order. Meanwhile, our B plot, I guess you could call it, is Donald doing his best to basically relax, but naturally, with a family as wacky and wild as his own, that is better said than done, as we come to find out that Donald is viciously molting because of all the stress in his life, and his doctor actually ordered him just some downtime. It's like, dude, you gotta rest or else you're gonna go bald, which is something I can relate to a little too much in terms of stress and male pattern baldness. We then see what is probably my favorite just pun in terms of just puns, as we see that Webby and Huey want to view this tape called the Necronomicon set. And I don't know what it was about that title, but I died hearing that, because I'm just like, wow, that looks like the VHS container kind of looked like the Necronomicon from uh, The Evil Dead. And I'm just like, okay, that's weird, but that name just killed me. It killed me. And speaking of which, it's obvious that Webby and Huey are up to some undead shenanigans, as Donald kind of ignores any kind of signs that they're up to no good, but he can't ignore it much when the dead is literally rising from their graves all around him. A thing of note, why are there so many dead bodies just in McDuck Manor? That's a question I think we need to come back to at some point. Back on the moon, we see that Lunaris is just kind of talking things over with Della about the fact that Della just still continues to live out in the wilds of the moon, and he feels that Della should move into town with the rest of them. Because he feels this bond with Della. Lunaris and Penumbra are the warriors of the moon, great defenders of the various moon mites. But now that the whole situation with the moon mites are under control, Penumbra, isn't really taken to the fact that she no longer has a duty. And she's kind of taken her frustration out on Della for the most part. But, with the idea of possibly kind of rooming with Penumbra, Della agrees, much to Penumbra's displeasure, as she continues to not trust Della for the most part. But Lunaris pulls her aside and tells Penumbra a story, which I feel that Penumbra should probably know, but, Lunaris talks about his father, who was very much lived in fear of the earth, as over time various rockets would come up off of the Earth's surface, and he felt that it could lead to a potential invasion. So the moon people lived in fear and even hid themselves away because of it. Lunaris doesn't want to be like his father, and one of his steps towards that is just, to get to know Della for the most part, understand her, and learn everything that she knows so that he can better understand the Earth in general. Meanwhile, the dead is walking as, Huey and Webby are just doing their best not to be captured by the evil dead. And speaking of which, Donald goes full on Ash with a chainsaw strapped to his arm, cutting down various zombies. But apparently there's a chapter on how to get the dead back in their graves in the Junior Woodchuck guidebook, as Huey says the magical words and the dead are sucked back into the earth. Although Donald is a little bit worse for wear from the experience, and goes to his houseboat in order to try once again to relax, which is immediately shown to be in vain as we come to find out that Dewey has the winged shoes of Hermes. I think it was Hermes. The messenger of the gods. And we find out that Dewey had actually stolen them from Stork Elise's chest and has been dubbed an honorary god for the most part, much to the wrath and anger of Zeus himself, who has declared war on Dewey Duck. Speaking of which, Della continues to basically annoy Penumbra in the fact that Penumbra and her will now be rooming. And, while Penumbra takes great pride in the moon and all her possessions and everything that she has here, mostly because she's fought and defended it for so long, Della doesn't show the same kind of, compassion and understanding towards it. She kind of treats it as quaint little objects and trinkets here and there. So it just continues to grow the animosity, especially when Della kind of belittles this golden spear that Penumbra has that was given to her at a very young age, which meant apparently a lot to Penumbra. But as Della continues to do her best to work on the Spear of Selene, various other moon people come and greet her and get to know her and try to talk things out with her and just, learn her story for the most part. And they actually end up taking a liking to Della and her story of wanting to get back to her home and her family, that more and more people start to help her fix the Spear of Selene. Much to the anger of Penumbra, who feels that she doesn't want her people to be swayed into loving the earth more than they care for the moon as a whole. But as Della continues to tell great adventurous stories about the earth, the moon people are more and more taken with the earth itself. Speaking of being taken, Zeus is on the warpath, doing his best to basically try to strike down Dewey right there and then because of his pettiness for the most part. And Della has actually gained quite a following in terms of people who actually want to help her fix up the Spear of Selene, as she, basically just tells people and regales them with stories of her time on Earth, which of course it'd be exciting. Della has lived a very fascinating and fun life for the most part. I'm not even the least bit surprised that people are taken with her stories of adventure and intrigue and just random quests that she's been on with her family. But Penumbra is just really starting to have enough of Della in general. But Lunaris is always there to keep Penumbra in check and to keep her from doing any true harm to their very welcome guests, as it becomes very clear that the thing that Lunaris is most interested in is the inner workings of Della's spacecraft, as he's very interested in how it launches, it lifts off, and the fact that it's very simplistic in order to design. And after Zeus has actually basically gotten tired and gone home. Storkleys, Dewey celebrate their victory, while Donald is just really exasperated from the whole situation and tries to hide out in Scrooge's closet, only to be discovered by Scrooge. But it's not just Donald who's discovered by Scrooge, it's Louis as well, who apparently was rummaging around in Scrooge's pockets for spare several $1,000 bills. But it's not even Louis who Scrooge is after. It is, in fact, this mythical goat who is here in order to summon them on a quest of treasure and adventure in this mythical dimension. And so Scrooge and Louis are sucked in, and so is Donald, for the most part. And as we see that Della has actually got her engine up and running, much to the disdain of Penumbra, who was trying to get some sleep, Della calls out to the people that this is it, this is the end. She's gotten the Spear of Selene up and working, and it's only a matter of time before she sets out back to Earth. But Penumbra uses this opportunity to stoke the flames of just mistrust, as she says that Della was so great and amazing as she tries to play herself off as, surely she could take the moon people with her on her quest, which they all agree. It's just that would be fun. They would enjoy going to Earth, getting that idea in their head. However, the Spear of Selene isn't designed for so many people, and Della has no choice but to turn them down. But Penumbra uses this once again to show that Della isn't as all-powerful and almighty as she claims to be, to the point where even the moon people start to kind of blame each other about the fact that apparently Della doesn't seem to want to take them with her. But, Della denies this, but Penumbra pushes the issue, saying that, maybe she's ashamed of the people, feeling that they're weaker and more inferior. If Della truly cared, she would step forward and do her best to take everyone, which, Della, never stepping down from a challenge, agrees to this for the most part. And since she's basically learned rocket science after all this time, fixing up the Spear of Selene, she feels that she could possibly even design a way in order to take all the people of the moon with her on her excursion back to Earth, much to the cheers of the people and the disdain of Penumbra. And as Scrooge, Louis, and Donald make their way back from their mythical adventure, Donald is even more frazzled than ever. And when the kids come in to talk about their recent adventures, Donald just leaves, basically broken for the most part, which immediately catches the attention of the kids and Scrooge. Penumbra still continues to try to talk to Lunaris about her distrust for Della. Feeling that ultimately her quest to take everyone with her to Earth will get them all killed in the end. But Lunaris continues to denounce this, saying that they need to be there for Della, because she's been there for them for the most part. And in comes Della, interrupting their whole talk in order to present Penny, as she calls her, with her fixed up spear that she broke earlier, as a thank you for helping her fix her Spear of Selene. Della, wanted to come and, thank them for just letting them into her lives and giving her the opportunity to see her children once again. And just feeling that she empathizes with Penny and the fact that she's entrusting Della with the lives of people that she greatly cares about. And she understands that that's a hard thing, as she has to she's forced to just sit back and let someone else raise her children. And this kind of resonates with Penumbra for the most part. Meanwhile, Donald is just done. He's done with trying to relax. He understands it's a futile venture. But in comes his family and Storkules, who have actually planned Donald a, cruise in a nice tropics where nothing will happen, where he can actually have some downtime, and his family will watch over the kids while Donald gets some nice, well-deserved rest. Meanwhile, while Penumbra is starting to come around to Della for the most part, she doesn't want to, let her people go. She still feels that Della will get her people killed. But that's when she comes to a realization and formulates a plan of her own, basically to take Della up to her ship and flip the emergency launch switch, causing Della to have no choice but to kind of take the reins and possibly ride it back to Earth without everyone, as Penumbra suggests. But Della doesn't want to leave. She doesn't want to betray the trust of the moon people who had so much faith in her. But Lunaris says that no, this is your time to go. If anything, just leave the blueprints with us. That way we create our own ships and possibly visit Earth. Which Della is all too happy to do, as, frankly, she doesn't need it anymore. She's gotten her ship fixed, so why not just give it to them so they can possibly get off the moon and, go out exploring as she has. And with one last hug goodbye to a very kind of contemplative Penumbra, Della sets off, finally making her way back to Earth for the first time in years. Meanwhile, Lunaris takes this opportunity to shoot himself into the shoulder, much to the shock and horror of Penumbra. And as the people come out to see the Spear of Selene returning to Earth, Lunaris goes on to say that Della betrayed them. She only was using them. She was an Earth spy and was using them as a way of getting back to Earth. She says that she was the first wave in an invasion from the Earth, and she was sent there to observe them and see how weak and feeble that the moon people were. But Lunaris does his best to rally the people, to show the Earth that they are not weak, and to use the blueprints that he says he wrestled from Della to create their own fleet of ships, invade the Earth, and strike them before they can strike the moon, much to the horror of Penumbra. And when she goes in to confront Lunaris about this, feeling that, Lunaris' plans will ultimately get their people killed, and it's not right to lie to them, Lunaris brushes this aside, saying that he does not want to live in the shadow of his father, who lived in nothing but fear of the moon itself, of the Earth itself, my apologies. He feels that it's their time to strike fear into the Earth, with him at the helm. And when Penny questions why Lunaris even went to the trouble of pairing Della with her, because he knew that she hated her so much, and Lunaris simply says, because Della liked you. It was obvious that Della had really taken a shine to you. And he goes on to say that the reasoning behind this is because Della told Lunaris that it was because Penny reminded her of her brother. Which, brings it all together. Why? The squabbles, the seriousness of Penumbra and all that. Yes, it's very much a Donald trait. The fruitless anger and all of that. Which, and as Lunaris leaves, Penumbra is left with nothing but her thoughts as to what to do now that they will soon come into war with the Earth itself. And as Donald makes his way to the site for the cruise, he sees the Spear of Selene crashing into the woods. And hopeful that he'll finally get to see his sister again, he starts to explore the Spear of Selene. But during his exploration of the ship, he accidentally hits the launch activation and sends himself careening out into space, as Della Duck has finally made her way to McDuck Manor. her way back home. Oof, this episode was a mile a minute. Just so much happened, so much fun stuff. It very much felt reminiscent of an old Donald Duck cartoon with him just constantly trying to get comfy and, just take some downtime, but he never can seem to. Like, that's some old school, like, Looney Tunes, Disney comedy right there, of just a character fruitlessly trying to get comfortable. As it seems like the entire world, the entire universe has conspired against them finally getting some comfort. But, of course, we couldn't have it as simple as Donald just meeting his sister right off the bat. Of course, he had to be flung into space all of a sudden. So hopefully he'll be found ASAP. But now we have Della Duck back on Earth, ready to see her children. So I want you to tell me your thoughts in the comment section below. How did you feel about this episode? How did this episode make you feel about Penumbra? How did it make you feel about Della? What do you feel about the personality connection Della made between Penumbra and Donald? Do you think that it's warranted, or do you just not see it? So many episodes have been released around the time that I'm putting out this video that I'm not gonna even go into theories, but just general thoughts on this episode. Did you like it? Did you hate it? And how did you feel about it as a whole? And if you like this video I made, feel free to leave me a like or a dislike if you didn't much care for it. And tell me why you didn't like it in the comment section below, and how I can make better videos for the future. And how about subscribing and hitting the bell icon? That way you never miss another DuckTales episode review. And if you want to find me on social media, just Google Duuz-Diz-Din. I am everywhere, for better or for worse. And until the next video, just remember, you can always find a way back to your family. Bye-bye.